Okay, now my latest challenge repair project is this. It's a power antenna out of a 2000 Mazda Miata, and it no longer works. It has an electric motor inside this area, and it turns this coil. It has sort of a plastic, like a chain, but it's not a chain, it's just a piece of like a plastic strip, and the plastic strip is glued to the end of the antenna inside of it. And so when the radio is turned on, this electric motor turns this coil this way, and it pushes the antenna up to full height. And then when the radio is turned off, it sends a signal for this thing to turn the motor on and turn this in this direction, pulling the cable back into itself and retracting the antenna. I've taken this apart, and I've found that that plastic coil or nylon coil is no longer attached to the antenna. So when you turn the radio on, you hear this thing going, it's trying to do its thing, but the cable is no longer connected, so it just sits there and rotates and does nothing, and you have no radio reception because the antenna isn't, up in the air like it should be. So my challenge is to take this apart, take the plastic cable out, take the antenna out, reinsert the cable back into the antenna shaft, and somehow glue it back inside onto this first segment of the antenna. So if it's glued on again, then it will retract it and also push it back out. But I have to have a strong glue connection between this plastic nylon cable and this steel antenna shaft. So right now I'm going to take this thing apart, investigate what's involved. I know there's this plastic nylon coil in here, and it's all greased up, so it's a big mess. But if I can take that apart and then take this antenna shaft out and see if I can actually, literally glue that cable back inside this antenna, I'm going to use epoxy. And then once that's nice and cured and strong, then I'll reassemble it and hopefully it'll work. So here we go. To get that out of the way, and then I always like to put the screws back in where they go if I can, so I don't lose them and I know where they go. On this side, it included this little attachment that went on that one screw, and I believe that's sort of it must be like a grounding thing, because this screw is screwed into this bracket, which is bolted to the chassis of the car. So I'm thinking that's why this has this grounding part of it. The antenna shaft, once I remove these two screws, this thing just gets pulled right out. And normally, if it was not broken, if I was pulling this thing out, there would be the plastic cable that still would be connected to this spool inside, and it would be right in the middle of that thing, and it would be coming out if I pulled this out. But since that's not connected anymore, this just pulled right out. And so then I took all the screws out that held this together, and I pried it open with just a pry bar. And if I open the top, you can see there's an electric motor, and it turns gears that turn this coil, this spool of this plastic cable. And this plastic cable goes around and goes through here and enters into the antenna like that. So take this apart. You can see it better. It's hard to do it with one hand, but it really just sort of falls out. Not really. Needs a little help. I'll be right back. Okay, so first of all, this spool comes off. You can see that's that plastic chain, cable, whatever you want to call it, I'm talking about. It's all coiled up on this spool. Put that aside. We'll take this part out. You can see what I'm talking about. Electric motor turns a worm gear, which turns this gear, which turns this gear, which turns this gear, which is what turns the spool. Okay, so you can kind of see how it works. So the project is to take this cable, route it back through where it goes into the antenna shaft, and somehow glue it to the top section of the antenna. So, got my epoxy ready. I just got to figure out how to get it into this thing and glue only this cable to the top shaft. I don't want to glue the whole shaft together. So that's the challenge. Okay, so now the goal is to glue that to the end of the smallest part of the antenna. So I think I need to disassemble this to break it down to get to where I can get to that one part. So this nut is what bolts it to the body of the car. And so if I take that off, this, whatever you want to call that thing, comes right off. And then this cast part needs to come off. And if you look closely, you can see it's been pressed on over these two little bumps. And so if I spread this out slightly, it should pop off. So I was just able to pry it off. Oh, yeah, there it goes. See? Pry it off. So that's off. And now I think this antenna can just come right out of the tube. So we're down to this part. And this is a telescoping thing, so there's all these tubes inside each other. And the very last one is the skinny one, and that's the one I want to glue the nylon cable to. So I think I need to get this out of this whole thing. So in order to do that, I think I have to unscrew, I hope it's screwed on, this top piece, because once that's off, I think this small part will just drop right through and come out the bottom and allow me to glue that cable onto it. So let's see if I can unscrew this. Okay, so I've put the antenna mast in my vise, and luckily the small section was long enough to fit in my vise, the width of my vise. So now I got that nice and tight, and I'm just going to use some vice grip pliers and break this loose. And this should screw off. So it did come off. And I was able to stick a big, like a large toothpick, I can't remember what these things are called, but it's like we're doing shish kebabs or something. Stick that in there and push it out, and sure enough, the small section is coming out. And you can see it's got like a fitting, if this thing will focus on it, but it's got a fitting that will accept that cable. So if I clean this thing up and I clean off the cable, I should be able to put some epoxy inside that tube and stick the cable in and let it dry. And that should fix it. I can put it all back together. Let's see. Okay, so I wire brushed this part, cleaned it up a bit. If I get it in focus. Anyway, it's sort of like a ferrule on a paintbrush. It's just a tube, and then it's attached to the rod. I don't know if it's threaded. It might be threaded on this end, and this ferrule would be part of the cable, and then the rod would just screw into the ferrule. I could try to break it loose, but I don't know if it's worth it. I don't want to break anything or bend the aerial, so I'm just going to try to clean that up. Spray some cleaner in there, clean off the end of the cable so that I get a clean glue connection. So I think that's going to work. As long as the glue holds, we'll be in business. Because that's what failed. That cable popped out of that ferrule and wouldn't allow it to work anymore. So hopefully I can put it back together. We'll see. Okay, so now I used some brake cleaner and sprayed it in that hole of the ferrule to try to get any grease out, dissolve any grease that might be in there, because I don't want the grease in there because it'll stop the epoxy from curing and making it a really solid connection. And then after I pushed this cable back into the tube, I marked it with a red marker so I know it has to go back in that far. So that's how much of the cable it's going to be inside the tube with glue. And then it also kind of looks like maybe they crimped it, like where the teeth are. You can kind of, if I could get this thing to focus. I don't know how to do that, but so anyway, my next step is to put epoxy in this ferrule and some on the end of that cable, and then push it back in there and maybe even crimp it a little bit and then let it dry overnight, and then we'll test it tomorrow, see how strong it is, and if I can't yank it apart, then I'll know that's probably strong enough to work. So next step, epoxy. Okay, so now I stirred up the epoxy, mixed it up. I applied some into the ferrule. I put a bunch around the cable, and I pushed the cable in as far as I could get it to go, according to my red mark there. And so I'm just clamping it in my vise, and I'm gonna let it sit there overnight. And tomorrow we'll test that and see how strong that bond is. Hopefully it'll be what we need, and we'll be able to reassemble that thing and get it working. We shall see. Okay, so now it appears that the epoxy has cured. It's all dry, and I can't pull it out of there I can't pull it out of there. So I hope that means it's in there for good. And now I'm going to try to thread it back into the rest of the telescoping antenna. I don't know if I first have to put it on the coil first to make sure it's there. Yeah, I think I have to thread it through the coil first. So just put it all back together and grease it up and see if it works.
You to some electronic dance music. So, at the age of 67, I went to our local club and just asked to be let in, and every